This is the vlog for September 30th, 2018. And as you may have guessed, I picked up this book, which is the Tal'Dorei campaign setting created by none other than Matt Mercer of Critical Role. This is the campaign setting for the original Critical Role campaign, featuring, among others, Grog and the twins and a whole bunch of other characters whose names I don't know because I got into Critical Role in the second season. There was just so much. I would have loved to watch the first season if there were an abbreviated version of it. I'm still thinking of picking up comic books online for the first campaign. But it's a lot of hours per episode and a lot of episodes. I mean, I think they were playing for 2 or 3 years. But this might be the next best thing too. This is the dream. Matt created a campaign setting and turned it into a real book. And if you don't believe it, there he is right on the back cover. How's that? What a handsome man. Right now I'm flipping through the races section. And sort of interestingly, here's the Dragonborn page. He has a subrace of Dragonborn called Ravenites, which have some of the traits I gave the Shining Scale Dragonborn in my campaign setting. Namely, the ability scores... Oh, no, I take it back. I read that wrong. Their ability scores are Constitution by 1 and Wisdom by 1. The Silver Scale are much closer to baseline Dragonborn with... let's see, Strength +2 and Wisdom +1. They make good clerics. And druids and anything else that uses wisdom, like rangers, for example. But Goliaths, Grog, half-orcs. So it's worth noting that Tal'Dorei is apparently one continent, and the continent that the second campaign takes place in is in the same... let's see if I can remember the name of Exandria. That's what it was. So Exandria is the world. Tal'Dorei is the continent and the home of the first campaign. I don't know the name of the second continent for the Mighty Nine campaign off the top of my head, but I think it's sort of interesting. This book was created probably just in advance of the second campaign. But here's a picture of a half-orc, and I love that the sort of two-tone color scheme that Ford has, is apparently a racial trait. I thought that was something that set him apart, but yeah, maybe that's just what it is. Also, Genasi are apparently one of the native races of this campaign setting, which is pretty interesting to me. Oh, God. This is so cool. I could just sit here and look at this for the whole 5 minutes or 10 minutes probably. But I do want to talk about where I got it. That's sort of the other important story here. Boy, I am going to steal so many of the monsters out of this book if I can. Oh, and magic items. Oh, new feats. Whoa. Recovered cultist. Oh, these are backgrounds. Neat. Oh, and class options. Ah, cool. Oh, and isn't that a fantastic picture right there? There they all are. Even the bear. Nugget, is that his name? No, that's the link dog from the second campaign. The bear had a much more flowery name. So, where did I get the book? I've talked a little bit about Uncle's Games on this channel, and it's the closest game store to where I live. It's in the Redmond Town Center in Redmond, downtown Redmond, and it's well stocked. like most game stores, it focuses more on board games, which are easier to pick up and play and more family friendly, require less of an investment, although the individual games can be quite pricey. Less of an investment of time, I should probably say. So Uncle's Games is great for that. It's great if you like Magic cards or if you like Star Wars miniatures or any number of other things. And it has a small section for role-playing games, including D&D, and a nice section of miniatures for D&D and other Pathfinder or other fantasy games as well. But where I went today, the Mox Boarding House, is much more like the grandiose game store I used to work at, which was WizKids Games, which was Games and Gizmos, and then was WizKids Games, and then was Games and Gizmos again, Genesis Games and Gizmos. Mox Boarding House has a restaurant built into it, with a full menu and quite a beer list, actually, which is sort of surprising and startling. I didn't have any beer. It was lunchtime, and I didn't feel like drinking in the middle of the day with the cold I'm getting over. I feel a lot better, by the way. I sound terrible, but I feel loads better right now. It has aside from the restaurant, which is a full half of the whole building, and it looks like they were two separate offices in the same little office building in the commercial district between Bellevue and Redmond. It's right on Bellred Road, actually. But the game store part, the front is a full-on board game section, which makes sense. That's the area you want to lead with. Don't scare off the straights. One little nook is the RPG section with a much more robust RPG selection than the one at Uncle Games. They have a painting table and a whole bunch of Nolzur's miniatures, paint stuff available. There's also a tabletop wargame room, which has a bunch of the tabletop wargame stuff for sale along the outsides, and then has 4 big tables for actually playing, which is very cool. Across from that, there's between that and another room is a little hall that I'll get to in a second. But opposite the tabletop wargame area is a card game area where a lot of people are playing Magic. And then the hall that connects the war games, board games, and front room also connects to a tournament room, which was jam-packed. I would not be exaggerating to say there were probably over 100 people, especially if you consider the restaurant and the game store combined. Over 100 people today, because this is apparently the release weekend for a new Magic the Gathering expansion, a game that they have been making since I moved back here in 1992. In fact, I think it actually got started in 1990 or 91, and is still going strong 28 years later. This particular release is the return to Ravnica. Is the third time they've visited the Ravnica setting, and I guess this is a very popular setting. I don't know much about it myself, except that Ravnica is so popular, they're turning it into a D&D book with stats for all sorts of interesting characters and dangers and all sorts of things. Sounds very cool. And I think I'm going to pick it up. I love this stuff. The whole Splat books. And it's sort of interesting. I've got at least 6 D&D 5th edition books at this point. I've got the core 3, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Volo's Guide to Monsters, and the Curse of Strahd campaign setting adventure book. That's the thing, is that instead of a lot of background information for campaign setting books, Wizards is focusing on adventures that set the tone for the campaign, give you tons of statistical information, and then basically say, go at it. This is your setting. Do with it as you please. You don't have to follow any general cultural stuff. We sort of set the tone with that, with what's already here. We've provided a bunch of names to give an idea of what to name stuff. We've got maps. We've got the hard stuff to come up with. The easy stuff is just imagining how it all connects together and how to bring your world to life. But I do love reading campaign setting material because I've done it so much in my life. I grew up playing role-playing games in the 90s, and obviously in the early 2000s when I worked at one of these stores. I sort of fell out of it after I stopped working for the game store, and my focus in more recent years has been mostly on video games. But getting back into Dungeons and Dragons with Fifth Edition has definitely opened up my eyes. And I can't help but stare at this book. I really want to go read it, so I'm probably going to do that now. Anyway, I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.